Hey, all you quarantined listeners out here. It is Matt and Joe, and we have the latest episode of the podcast of record for you. We're still broadcasting remotely. Joe and I are each in our home studios, but we still have these beautiful mics bringing the highest possible sound quality.
The best sound quality.
The best
Better
sound quality
than most people on like
better
national
sound
news
quality,
right now
yeah,
have.
definitely than Chris Cuomo had on his
Yeah.
like quarantine show. I
It
think
just sounds like they went to the most echoing room in their house to do these things.
for sure. Yeah, I just went to a spare bedroom, as you can see behind me if you're watching live. Well, not live, but if you're watching.
With lots of pillows, so it dampens the sound.
Yeah, lots of pillows, a TV. Occasionally there's a baby in here. Occasionally there's a small dog. You just never know. So let's kick it off. We've got some hot news stories for you, and then we're going to talk about what else is there to talk about. We're going to talk about coronavirus, about how Facebook's handling it. We're talking about how Disney's handling it. But first off, right off the bat, Facebook will alert people who have interacted with coronavirus misinformation. This is out of the Washington Post. You may have seen this story. It's floated around basically every major news outlet. So Facebook is going to attempt to determine which information about coronavirus is incorrect. And then if you've liked, read, watched, shared, done anything with it, they're going to notify
like
you with
6
an
weeks
email
ago,
and an
they
app
would have
notification.
suppressed the information that said you should wear a mask.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't understand. I'm
just saying, there's a lot of people on my feed that are going to end up with some notification.
Yeah, look, I don't understand Facebook's play here. I think it's to avoid bad PR from their rivals in the media. But look, one thing Facebook just needs to point out is most of their media critics work for rival corporations, right? Like if you work for ABC News or CNN or Fox,
basically everything is a rival to Facebook at this point, right? Because Facebook is trying to get into so many different industries. Basically every company is a Facebook rival.
I'll tell you who doesn't notify you when you interact with fake content.
Google.
Every other media service ever that hides retractions in the deepest recesses of their website.
Yes.
So
CNN just deletes things. They don't let you know on a breaking CNN news alert that something they talked about earlier was incorrect.
Part of this is, I think Facebook just avoiding I think Facebook knows they're in the driver's seat. Most of their other rivals and mainstream media are slowly sinking. Like if you've watched any major live TV events in the last week or so, the Facebook company is the lead sponsor. They were the lead sponsor of that Together Alone Zoom extravaganza on Saturday night. They're the lead sponsor of the new Michael Jordan documentary, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So, they are very slowly going to capture those companies that are their biggest critics.
Question, do you think this is also a play in order to try and prevent them from getting pulled into an inevitable lawsuit down the road so that there are no discovery options for what's going on at Facebook? Because I could definitely see if there's some sort of class action lawsuit against, and you can't really bring one against the federal government or the president, but let's say there was a class action lawsuit against, I don't know, a state agency or somewhere that didn't have sovereign immunity, where Facebook was a means of sharing the incorrect information. Let's say it's, when a few weeks ago people didn't need to wear masks or whatever the information is.
Let me take you
Facebook's trying to avoid being a part of that.
Let me take you a little deeper on that line of thought, because I think you're right.
Take me deep.
I think there's a problem. This whole idea that we're going to reopen. Shit isn't going to reopen until either the federal government or state governments clarify liability, because no business is going to take the risk of bringing employees back into it or customers back into it if there's a chance that they could have a ruinous lawsuit filed if somebody,
or they're just going to make everybody sign a waiver before they come in.
Yeah. So
I don't think employees are going to have to sign waivers saying like, I'm voluntarily sacrifice, my rights to litigation in order to make a paycheck.
And then there's going to be a question, if you get it at work, is it subject to workers' comp? Like you're not going to have sports and live events. Like, I'm sure the Disney and parks will find out a way to navigate this. But right now, like nobody's talking about the legal considerations that are there. We've had a few clients who are canceling in-person type events for that concern, even going out a year,
right?
Because you have a significant liability issue. So it's not just Facebook; it's all the way down. Like there's no significant reopening until companies figure out how to deal with the liability now that COVID is going to have. And it
But who
has
sets that,
COVID.
right? I mean, is that the federal government that needs to set that? Is that the state government that needs to set that? Is that the state bar association that needs to
So
set those
I mean,
guidelines?
I think I was thinking about this over the weekend. There's a few things I ran into. So one, typically you would find this in tort law, it's going to be a state level thing, but the
Mhm.
federal government could also use the emergency declaration it has or allowed in every state to just kind of say during the state of emergency, all necessary businesses or all businesses have, immunity from torts during this time period. So there's multiple ways to handle it. I don't know. It's come up to public
Well, the
attention.
thing is state executive orders have very little teeth, so that would almost certainly have to be like a federal,
Well,
like,
that's what I
presidential
said. I
executive
think they
order,
could do it
yeah.
at the federal level. So that's going to be one of the things that has to be figured out before significant reopening happens.
That's
Think even
interesting.
about somebody like and like maybe this is already in the indemnification waivers you sign when you go into a Disney World or something like that when you buy your ticket. Is something like this, but I doubt it.
If it's not now, it probably is going to be soon.
But look, the biggest problem, and we'll talk about this a little more down in the big news story segment with Facebook doing the fact checking is in a situation like this, the facts are changing. The facts aren't all known. So what they're doing is, oh, we're going to go with, whatever the government agency say. Well, which government agency? The local health department or the CDC?
Mhm.
Looks like it says World Health Organization is what they're referring people to.
Great. Who was also telling people not to wear masks 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
I think the
go ahead.
idea behind that originally was that if you are staying at home, you don't need to wear masks. That was the idea. So that they would save it for people. But now they're recognizing that we can make these masks. We don't have to have like these hospital grade masks to wear out in public. I don't know that it was like a intentional like don't wear masks kind of thing, but I think the idea was if you stay home, you don't have to.
Well, they were trying to get people not to run out and buy all the masks. So that because there was a shortage. But that wasn't what any of the message points were that were coming out. It wasn't "Don't go buy the mask" because we need them for first responders. It was "Don't go buy the mask" because they're not really that helpful for you. Now they may be not that helpful for you because you were staying
Yeah.
home, and
I mean, the
also
N95 masks are not helpful because you have to get them properly fitted. And I think that's what people were buying.
yeah. Well, I mean, the scarves and stuff people are wearing now would be roughly the same thing. But the mask issue is just one issue, right? And so assume there's no actual malevolence behind it. Assume what it is just like it's a changing and dynamic situation. So, when no one knows, like Facebook is in this position of trying to guess, like, oh, what is the best thing at the time? And the best thing at the time often turns out not to be the actual best thing.
Sure. Moving on to the next story, this is out of Bloomberg. Apple, the company that is famous for not doing anything nefarious with your data. Apple unveils Maps tool showing activity changes during the pandemic. So Apple is taking anonymized data from people walking and
Anonymized
driving.
quotation marks.
Yeah. And public transit in communities, and showing how much people are moving or not moving.
Yeah, great. I'm in a spicy mood today about this. So I mean,
They also announced a
so,
contact tracing partnership with Google that it plans to roll out in mid-May. So now we have the two largest tech
well,
companies and
because you
phone
can put
software
it natively on the
manufacturers,
OS if they
yeah,
agree. You can have it on
in the
both
world,
OSs.
adding some new tracking features. So,
Yeah, I mean, look,
but
the
hey, you can pay with Apple Pay.
the trade-off on the tracking features, it's going to be one of those things that I think is required for any significant sort of reopening. So I guess as far as tracking goes, like if it's in the OS, at least it's easy. At least I don't have to install it. But look,
Except that you're going to have to
done,
update the OS in order to install it, and like people are famous for taking months or years to update their phone operating
yeah,
system
but
when a new
Apple and
update is
Android
pushed.
can both just ping them nonstop with reminders to do it until they finally break them and get them to do it. And you don't need everybody, right? What you need is a given percentage of people to be
Hmm.
effective for that. Um, Look, it's just one of the, and we've talked about this in prior episodes. Like, what's happened is we went from this, like, it just far in one extreme, like privacy, hearings over privacy, congressional hearings with big tech and privacy, sacrifice privacy, to now everybody's rooting the other direction.
Well, I
Please
think,
track us.
I mean, they're talking about hiring contact tracers, like actual people who figure
Mhm.
out where the sources of these various whatever they're called clusters of COVID uh, diagnosis are like centering,
Mhm.
so that you can figure out who actually needs to be quarantined and who's okay. And I think this would help with that. That, I mean, it's just a helpful feature just to trace that and go backwards. I think the privacy thing from before was election interfering. I mean, that was like the really big thing.
Mhm.
It wasn't related to something that is affecting everyone's health and well-being.
So, I think it's one of those things where, like, I have no question that it will be highly effective to do the contact tracing using something embedded on your phone. Your phone never leaves, for most people, a 3-foot radius around their body. 24/7 it's with you. I think what you create down the road are unintended consequences of this sort of tracking and tracing. Because right now it's like, oh, it's great, it's helpful. Once things like this start, they don't tend to go away, because what happens, you put smart
You're not
people in
going
the
to
room who are working on
uninstall it from
this,
the operating system.
and you
Like
find other
once you've got
uses
it on
for it.
there, yeah.
You find really good other uses for it. For example, as an advertiser, you know what I'd pay a premium for? You bet I would pay a premium to advertise to people who had come in contact with a buyer of my product within the last 2 weeks or 10
Hmm.
days, or who they spent Christmas with, or who they went on a vacation with, or who they went to a ball game with, or who they went to a restaurant with. That's great advertising data. And
Yep.
neither one of these companies will be able to resist monetizing it at some point.
No, I mean it's the perfect
So I'd buy it.
opportunity.
Like,
Yeah, it's the
actually, just
perfect
voicing it,
opportunity
I'd pay
for
premium CPM on that target.
yeah, it's the perfect opportunity for them to get the cover to do something that they probably wanted to do anyways.
Yeah. And look, as an advertiser, that's an amazing product. I want it.
Yes.
It sounds yummy.
It's
Now,
creepy.
now, should it exist? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I mean that's a totally different
But
conversation.
look, I'm being accusatory on tech companies right now, but my position over the long term has been privacy is dead anyway. Like, it doesn't exist. It's an illusion. The Edward Snowden revelations from 5 or 6 years ago pretty much showed that, like, there was no privacy. So you may as well, as the
Well, I mean, if we
consumer,
can
get
do
the most
anything, I
benefit.
think we can safely say that like tech companies are past getting the benefit of the doubt at this point.
Yeah, but so what I'm saying is, from a consumer perspective, you may as well at least get the benefit of that. They're tracking you all the time anyway, by knowing if you've been exposed to a dangerous illness.
Right.
That and targeted advertising, I mean, we've talked about this, like, we like it. We like seeing the things we
Oh
want to
yeah.
get.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if this is, it could go in a number of directions, but I think right now it's necessary.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think even if you think it's distasteful, it's one of those things that gets people back out of the house and going again. And for that reason, I think it's an inevitability that it happens and probably has to happen.
And if there's anything that we know about society, it's that they always react better when they have more information at their disposal.
But at least you'll know who you came in contact with.
Yep. Moving on. TechCrunch. Google announces a journalism emergency relief fund for local newsrooms. So Google has, as part of its Google News initiative, has put out a journalism emergency relief fund, mainly for local newsrooms to try and stay afloat. So this is thousands of dollars for some small local newsrooms to tens of thousands of dollars for larger newsrooms, variations per region, but simply in order to try and keep some of these news outlets afloat. We talked a little bit about this on the last episode. I mean, I think it's an interesting problem that a lot of local news organizations have right now, in that they probably have more attention than
Yep.
they've had in any point in the last 5 years.
But their primary advertiser is getting hammered.
Well, or like they're depending on what their revenue model is, they're in a position where they can't monetize the most successful driver of traffic that they've had in the past possibly decade. right? Maybe since
Yeah.
September 11th, because they're all being pressured to offer coronavirus news and updates for free, right? They can't put them
Yeah.
behind their paywall. They can't make them sponsored content or anything else. So the primary driver of their eyeballs right now, they can't do anything to monetize.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think one of the things you're seeing Google do here is, yeah, they probably think it's a good thing to do, but the
And we're talking about a
secondary
significant
issue.
amount of money. I mean, we're talking about millions of dollars from Google, and then Facebook has committed $100 million to
Yeah,
support local news organizations.
but one of the things they're doing there, Matt, is not only the PR piece, but one of the things you'll notice when you Google or search anything on any of the major platforms about COVID-19 or outbreak or whatever, is they are severely restricting the search results that
Yep.
come back. So you are like a lot of stuff just doesn't get indexed anymore. So what will get indexed are the
Like freedomeagle.biz.
yeah, does not get indexed, right? Even if it's the highest even if it would be the highest relevant to the search. So there's been a lot of things that I've heard about in different places over the last few weeks. And then
Allnaturalnews.shop.
.shop. um, so Google and Facebook both need these local news sources to exist, so they have something semi-credible to put at the top of their search results.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, and more content is good for Google. Like it's more things to index. And it's more importantly, um, those are the places where Google's also making a significant amount of money from the embedded code snippets where they can place ads on
Yeah,
news sites, right? So, I mean, it's in their best interest in a lot of ways to drive more
prop those
traffic to local
platforms
news,
up. Yeah.
right?
Now,
Because Google can still make a lot of money on the increase in traffic talking about COVID-19. News channel, whatever, is going to have a lot more
yeah.
difficult time making money from
Yeah.
coronavirus.
Now, look, this ties into the overall theme of consolidation. I mean, what's happening is
Sure.
the businesses that don't go out of business are going to come under the sphere of influence of larger companies.
Yep.
They're effectively being captured.
Yeah, no, I mean that's completely fair. I mean, because no collection of small news organizations is going to be willing to band together at this point to try and consolidate power. So they're either going to just barely survive or get snapped up by a larger entity.
Yeah. Or, Google and Facebook decide to have these large, nonprofit arms that keep them funded.
Yep. Moving on. This next piece is out of Variety, which I mean, maybe the first piece out of Variety that we've ever talked about on the show. For those of you not familiar, Variety is basically a trade publication about Hollywood, film, music industries, read by everyone in Los Angeles. So maybe Nipa was reading it, a few years ago while she was out there. I don't know if she's still reading it today, if it's the epicenter of her world.
Not as much,
Not
but
as much.
it was definitely on every
Oh
table
yeah,
in
there's just
every
copies
lobby,
everywhere. Yeah, there's just
everywhere.
copies everywhere in LA. Like you're walking down the street, you don't have one, some dude just like puts one in your hand. So, out of Variety, Netflix is worth more than Disney after streamer stock hits an all-time high. So we know Disney stock has taken a huge plummet from their inability to make money from parks, which is a huge part of their business line right now, and then of course the sale of items that goes on at those parks. So Netflix has just continued to put out new content. Disney Plus is doing well, like is a decent side of the business for them, but the problem is it's still less than a year old, and they gave away millions of free subscriptions through different promos with other companies for the first year. So it is not generating the kind of revenue they need, and it's struggling on new content right now. Right, they've released a couple of films that were in theaters,
Supposed to be in
direct to
theaters.
Disney Plus. Supposed to be in theaters, yeah, early, but by and large, Netflix is still beating it at the content game because Netflix has had 800 pieces of content in development for the past year.
Yeah. And, Netflix, it's known how they perform in a streaming only world. Like
Sure.
they're a known quantity. Disney has to demonstrate that it can find a solution.
So, I mean, just because Netflix has been around longer too, and this isn't in the article, I don't think this is just some of the stuff we've talked about previously on the show. Netflix has spent years at this point, like working with local and national internet service providers to make sure that the streaming experience for Netflix is optimized across the system, right? And that means in a lot of cases, they've installed servers in local communities that have redundant copies of the shows that are most streamed. So before it went away, that was stuff like Friends. So they they think ahead to do that so that it's not as much of a strain on the bandwidth. I doubt Disney has gotten that far in their streaming package yet. I don't know that for sure, so it's
Yeah.
possible. But Netflix, has been around so long at this point and been in this game for so long, and it's the only thing they do, right? They're not also trying to operate parks and whatever else. Streaming is the only thing they do. There's a massive infrastructure surrounding it now that other streaming platforms just don't have yet.
Yep. And on the topic of, maybe successful Disney programming, you want to go
There's
to the
a
Jordan piece?
Yeah, there's a standout. So we don't have live sports to watch right now, but luckily ESPN had a nice piece of content in the hopper that came out.
10-part series.
Yeah, that came out 2 days ago. Was the premiere,
Yep.
right? And it's about Michael Jordan. It's called The Last Dance. So now ESPN has something to play other than recordings of old games that you don't want to see or endless talking head shows about sports that don't exist currently.
Yeah.
I haven't watched it yet. Has anyone else watched it yet?
I watched it. I watched episode 1.
What'd you think?
I haven't seen it yet, but I want to sit and watch it in silence.
And Nipa feels a strong personal connection to the greatest basketball player of all time. And why is that, Nipa?
Nipa, if you just if you made a consumer profile of Nipa, you'd never peg her as having intense feelings about professional basketball, but it turns out Nipa has intense feelings about professional basketball.
Well, does she, or does she just have intense feelings about Michael Jordan
and the Chicago
Kobe.
Bulls? That's true, and Kobe. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up watching basketball. I haven't kept up with it probably as much in the last decade, but I was in Chicago during Jordan's heyday.
Yeah.
You had to like basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it certainly wasn't baseball Chicago was doing in the 90s.
Yeah, but in your demographic and your consumer profiles, you'd never peg Nipa as someone who needs to watch the Jordan documentary in silence and full attention.
But here we are.
Here we are. So Nipa, I watched it. It is really well done, very well produced. I watched the first episode last night. ESPN is saying
ESPN gets enough credit for some of the documentary content that they put out because it's frequently very high quality.
Yeah, well, I mean, they also have some of the easiest content to work with for creating documentaries.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, they have millions of hours of footage that they can use at this point.
Yeah, and a storyline that's built in, right? So you take an athlete, you take a team, you take a game, you take a season, you pull the people who are a part of that, you ask them to talk about what was really happening, what they felt.
But let's be clear, Fox Sports is not putting out amazing documentaries.
No.
Right. So, I mean, there is something going on at ESPN with, 30 for 30, where they're able to take the assets that they have and put them into something really impressive.
Yeah.
It's the storytelling. They're able to tell a story, which is hard to do with that amount of content that's available.
It's that Disney ownership.
Well, and so maybe you see that happen out of Fox now because they're now owned by Disney. But
Disney had to sell off the.
That's right. They had to sell off the sports packages
in order to get the deal approved.
Yep, that's right.
ESPN said they had 6.1 million viewers. I did see in the credits that it was also produced with Netflix, but I haven't read that here. Have either of you seen? I don't think it's on Netflix.
No, I don't think it is.
Yeah, interesting. I saw it in the opening credits.
There could have, so what we may see now in some of these cases is during production, Netflix is underwriting production costs in order to secure exclusivity once it premieres out of whatever network it comes from.
Oh, interesting.
Right? So it's on, ESPN, let's say for the first couple months, that's the only place you can get it. But maybe Netflix paid upfront costs in order to secure exclusivity on the platform, away from I don't know, Hulu or anyone else for the next couple years.
Yeah.
Or Disney Plus even.
Yeah, I mean, it's really well done. And they had footage from that 97, 98 season that was just kept under wraps for 20 years.
I think they wanted to release it. I think it didn't make them look very good, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it was. And you can kind of see in the first episode, there's some of it that's there. But I also think my guess is that ESPN sped up the release of this too. My guess is if you're ESPN,
that's probably right. It was probably a summer release that they were shooting for.
Yeah. or do it like, right before the finals or right after the finals.
Yep.
Because that's an ESPN ABC license, the NBA Finals. All right, so
But interestingly enough, they don't have most of the playoffs. TNT
yeah,
maintains ownership of most of the playoffs. ABC just gets the finals.
yeah, I think ESPN has some games too in the
Yeah, I mean,
playoffs.
yeah, they just split them between, but I think they show the big games on.
So I mean, good for ESPN, Disney, and look, one of those things, and we'll talk about this in the Disney deep dive, is that Disney catalog. You can't underestimate what's there; it can be repurposed. So Disney
Yes.
has ESPN, ESPN has the NBA. They have all this file footage sitting around that's going to end up probably being their most successful piece of content during the COVID-19 period,
Sure.
which Fox doesn't have. No other sports network has that. Sun Sports is playing reruns of sport fishing.
What time to be alive.
So main stories.
Main stories.
I think the biggest interesting one is out of Axios. Facebook tries to draw a clear line on coronavirus protest. The social network will pull events that flout state rules on social distancing.
And if there's anything at this point in the story that we know about coronavirus, it's that we have a clear line and everyone agrees about what the facts are, and we can just move on forward from there.
So we kind of hit this issue a little bit more in the earlier stories, but I think one of the big narratives happening over the last few weeks is what is tech doing to address a potential issue, or cut off a potential issue. Like I don't know anybody is at the consumer level is seriously walking around like, man, I wish they would cut off those Facebook groups for a coronavirus protest. But I think the interesting thing here, Matt, is as these platforms mature, what they're doing is they're becoming they're self-regulating themselves into kind of mainstream institutions the way all large corporations ultimately do. And they behave more and more like pseudo governmental entities, right? And that's partially for their own political protection, and partially because it is easier to operate a business like that because it's lower risk.
Right.
So what I think you're going to see is we're going to go into a time. I think coronavirus is throwing a lot of things in the air. It's going to be a time we might not see it right now. The next few years are going to have rapid changes that come out of this. So we're going to come out of this and like, man, there's Facebook, there's Google, there's Microsoft, there's Apple, there's a handful of other tech companies, and then that's it. That's all there is. But in this process, these companies are going to become stagnant enough where they start to create opportunities for rivals to start to punch into their business models, because their business models
do you
are
think
also
it's existing rivals, or do you think it's newly formed rivals that take advantage of what cash is left in the system to start something new?
newly formed.
Yep.
Because the existing rivals have all created businesses around filling in the little niches and gaps that are available. So it's something that we haven't seen. Like the problem is institutionalized Google and institutionalized Facebook and Instagram.
It's not move fast and break things anymore.
It's not, and it becomes not interesting in an internet world where that's what people want. The consumption demands are so high. The consumer will move past it before the company realizes the consumers move past it. And that doesn't mean we're going to delete our accounts on these platforms. It just means they won't be as culturally interesting or engaging or authoritative. We'll move on to the next thing. And so I think what we're going to go through for the next maybe 3 or 4 years, maybe less, is peak tech consolidation, when these companies have control, they're relatively unchallenged by government. And then at the end of that period, you'll start to see a pretty rapid decline in their cultural value, and then eventually in their market share.
Unless Labor Secretary Bernie Sanders manages to break up big tech.
Yeah, but look, they won't do that. Like right now in coronavirus, what big tech is doing is just racking up massive political installation points. So Amazon's the big beneficiary here, because Amazon's going to be the de facto supply chain of the United States.
It kind of already was. We just didn't realize it.
Yeah, it was, but you could still go to other places. Now
Right.
going to a place is not as attractive as just ordering on Amazon. And so the mistake people make about Amazon is
Well, to be
Amazon
clear,
is
it
like a big
hasn't
store.
been. Yeah, it's been that way for me for
A
several
long
years
time,
at this
yeah.
point. Yeah,
But
yeah,
now
yeah.
it's like that for a lot
A lot
more
of people.
people.
Mhm.
And what they realize is Amazon isn't a store, Amazon is a system.
Yep.
And that system can deliver whatever it chooses, and it can do it really quickly. You
And it
know,
can inconvenience you if it decides that what you're ordering is not a necessary item and it's going to get Prime delivered next week instead of tomorrow.
yeah, yeah. For Facebook, Google, Twitter, what these platforms are going to do is they're going to come out of this and be like, look, we gave away $100 million to help small businesses. We protected people from false information. We were good citizen stewards. You should let us acquire these X smaller company or do this thing because like you can trust us. You can't trust these other small players. And the other thing that's going to happen here, and you're seeing this with
I'm
Facebook and Google right
visualizing
now.
I'm visualizing the Jungle Book where the snake Ka turns his little swirly eyes on and sings the song "Trust in Me."
Yeah. Well, look, that's what's happening. The other piece of this is those platforms, Facebook and Google specifically, are going to get finally some level of institutional capture on mainstream media.
Yep.
And once they have that, you will see the level of criticism they've gotten over the past 4 years start to cool off significantly. Because all of a sudden, when Facebook's your biggest advertiser, eh, you
Mm,
might be less likely to bring up a news story that's not in the news on them.
yep.
So I think that's the big news in tech is that consolidation is going to happen, and they're going to also provide a significant amount of political buffer for themselves.
Which is exactly what they need. Wait for the conspiracy theories to start on that one. Next thing we're going to be hearing that Facebook and Google started the coronavirus in order to
Yeah.
protect their market share.
With Bill Gates.
With
With Bill
obviously
Gates.
with Bill Gates.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean, Bill Gates has LinkedIn, so that was going to get a little bit of it.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Bill Gates wants to barcode everyone, so he
Well, he
gets
wants to inject the barcode in you with
yeah
his immunization shot. It's
for
got
sure.
So
nanos in it.
so if anyone has generated an enormous amount of goodwill, I feel like it's Bill Gates. And all of a sudden now we're like,
Yeah, no, I mean we talked about this. I think in last
Yeah.
week, or the week before. All of a sudden, like Bill Gates he's just been skating by for years. Like,
Well,
oh man, what a
eh,
good guy! Like he's started this foundation. He's pledged his entire like fortune to charity and all this stuff. I'm like, Bill Gates is trying to take over the world by implanting chips
so
in everyone.
look,
Like we went
what's
real
hurting Bill
quick to
Gates
that,
now is the same thing that hurt Bill Gates when he was running Microsoft in the late 90s.
and that's
Uh,
Bing search.
and that's yeah. No, it's this. Like he is incredibly intelligent. He is also, when he gets in a position where anybody is contending with him or conflicting with him, comes off as being like arrogant and condescending. And that's what killed him in that famous deposition video from the Microsoft antitrust hearing.
Yep.
So one of the things he's running into now is that same demeanor that everybody's familiar when he was the worst guy in the world in the late 90s. You start to see that reflected again, and it's a PR piece that he's
Mhm.
just not wanted to or ever address. But that's what you're seeing kind of clip up there is these old memories of like the Bill Gates from like the 1998 who was going to crush any business that got in the way and was hell-bent on world domination.
yeah, that makes me sad though, because it
Bill
feels
Gates
like,
is just out there trying to build a better toilet.
yeah, he's just trying to make things better for people, and people just want to hate smart people.
That's always been my problem.
Yeah. I hate him
Well, no, I mean that's why everyone hates me. I just decided.
because you're smart.
Just kidding. They hate me for other reasons. So let's talk about Disney for a second while we're on the subject of the coronavirus, since there's just not anything else to talk about right now. So Joe, you pulled some thoughts about Disney that was out
From
of
State of the
State of
Screens.
the Screens newsletter, which is a great newsletter. If you don't subscribe, you should. We don't have any sort of relationship with them. We just use it as a resource because it's a great email that comes out every week. But Bob Iger thought that he was rolling out of Disney right on top, thought that he had timed it perfectly. Disney Plus was a raving success. He was going to transition into a chairman of the board role, guide the new CEO for 6 to 12 months on taking over, and it was going to be all fun and games. And then coronavirus happened, and Bob Iger, while not recapturing the CEO title, has basically had to step back in as CEO.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you read those like long Tom Clancy or those long spy novel series, and like one novel
Every
ends.
time I tried to get out, that
Yeah.
they pulled me back in.
And then the next chapter opens like one day, or it's like John Wick, like the movie ends, and then the next movie comes out 2 years later, but it's really set like 15 minutes after the last movie ended.
Or 24. I always felt like
yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland just needed a break. Like,
Yeah, we just can't survive without Kiefer Sutherland.
So, here's what I wanted, and we talked about this a little last week, but Disney theme parks, 38% of revenue, media networks, 36, movie studios, 16%, other 10%. So what's interested is, we know theme parks cruises are about 40% of the revenue. What is easy to overlook is that media networks, so ESPN, those type of cable networks. One of the things that's helping Disney right now is cable companies have to pay Disney every month, regardless of the advertising revenues, a fixed fee for each of those networks.
Mm-hmm.
So that 36% of Disney's business is relatively stable. And then they have the opportunity to increase Disney Plus, which right now accounts for less than 10% of overall revenue, to being a significant piece of their business. There's a link in that story to an article by Matthew Ball, who was the former head of Amazon Studios and is now a venture capitalist who writes really long thought pieces about the media industry. And his thesis on the future of theme parks is this. In the past, what made Disney valuable is when Disney bought IP, so say Mickey Mouse or it developed Mickey Mouse, you could go to the theme park and you could hug Mickey. And the premium between Mickey existing and hugging Mickey is 100x. So how much does it cost to buy the Mickey Mouse VHS tape when you're a kid? $20. How much does it cost for your family to go to Disney World so you can get a picture with Mickey? $2,000.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the key value proposition that only Disney could bring. And then there was this other.
And basically, no other country in the world has created that relationship with a set of characters, right? Like Universal Studios and its affiliated parks, like basically only managed to start succeeding when they realized that they couldn't compete with Disney directly. They had to make more exciting rides.
Yeah.
Harry Potter helped, but you're not going to
Pick up a Harry
Hogwarts
Potter every 5 years.
or to hug Hermione, right? Like you're
Yeah.
going because you're going on the ride. You want to take a ride on the train. You want to go in Gringotts. Like no other company has created the relationship with characters, save for maybe like some Nickelodeon stuff in the 90s, the way that Disney has.
Yeah. So, and that's an important piece of the Disney equation. The other thing is it's a competitive barrier for Disney because it's probably not possible, given cost, development time, and the permitting required, for anybody else to go build a park now.
Yep.
Like there will probably be never another park built on that scale in the United States. So what you have is who owns the existing park structures in the country, at least in the US. But what Matthew Ball goes into here is, what does the future of that Disney property suite look like if the parks are less achievable? Either it's more expensive to go there because they let in fewer people, or they have significant time periods where they're closed. What he says is it's virtual environments is his argument. And that as far as, virtual reality or augmented reality goes, if that gets pushed in the next 10 years, it's because Disney decided to push it. And so once Disney enters that fray in a significant way, you're going to see a rapid adoption of virtual spaces. So in his case, he gives the what's the shooting game Fortnite, right? And he points out that some of the most commonly mocked up characters in Fortnite are actually Disney owned characters.
Mhm.
So in a virtual reality space or in a space like that, Disney can keep pushing in and licensing new characters until ultimately it figures out a way to create a virtual experience that's so unique and so gated that they're able to monetize it in that 10 or 20 or 50x way from
Yep.
just experiencing the the movie or the TV show or the cartoon.
Yep.
That was a lot to cover.
That was a lot to cover.
So thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that's a right assessment. I mean, there's certainly no other player in the space that is going to single-handedly create the kind of demand for virtual environments the way that Disney could, right? I mean, sports has tried to do it and had some marginal success, right? The NBA has probably had the most success of any like virtual, and it's not even really virtual, but I mean, they're putting, Oculus headsets on people so that they can experience, sitting in a chair at an NBA game, as opposed to just watching it normally on television. But I mean, I don't think there's any other brand in the world that would have the ability to do that.
With the high level of quality that Disney does everything.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the known IP. And so in the story, he gives the example of like Grand Theft Auto. And like one of the most commonly recreated characters in Grand Theft Auto is Iron Man. And so, building out digital theme parks is what he calls them. I'm assuming less violent than Grand Theft Auto and probably with less prostitutes.
But not
How
no
is that
prostitutes.
how is that going to address the actual physical contact piece of that? The hugging Mickey.
Yeah. So what he argues in the piece is that you replace hugging Mickey, which is this kind of one-dimensional space. You go there, you hug Mickey, you follow the pathway around the park, with providing a space where I'm looking for the name. He calls it the space where you unlock and unlimit human imagination. So you're replacing the Mickey hug with the creative and with the creative experience of being that character. So when you go meet Mickey, you're still you hugging Mickey. In these virtual worlds, you can be Mickey, you can be Iron Man, you can be Thor, you can
So
be whatever the Frozen princess's name is,
Anna and
Elsa.
Elsa, you noob. So one thing I think it does provide the opportunity that Disney has basically never done before is, I mean, using AI capability, it essentially allows you to now interact with the character in a way that even if you go to a theme park, you cannot do right now. Because the only characters that are allowed to speak to you in a theme park right now at Disney are the human characters. So you can speak to the princesses, basically, but none of the like core characters, the Mickey Mouses, the Donald Ducks, they're not allowed to talk to you. They have to interact solely by hand gestures. And there's a lot of reason for that. They want
Yeah.
continuity among voice and the way that that character interacts. That is something you can entirely control, though, in a virtual environment. So using the right AI technology, I could go meet Mickey Mouse. I wouldn't get the haptic feedback of hugging him, of touching him, but I could ask him a question, which if I'm a 7-year-old is not something I've actually ever been able to do, even
Yeah.
if I've gone to Disney
Well,
every week for the past year.
I mean, there's this kind of dystopian world, right? Where kids come home and they strap on the VR headset and then they have full on relationships
With characters.
with
Yeah.
characters that are just, AIs responding to them. They're learning what they
And
like.
Disney
They're
may
learning
be
about their
the
day at
only
school.
brand in the world
parents are gonna
would be
trust.
willing
Yeah.
to trust with their child having a virtual relationship with like that character.
Yeah. I'm going to say the virtual relationship with the character piece is definitely one that's going to get cut for the social media stuff this week.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah, probably.
never thought about that or heard it, but it's
Yeah.
such when you say that, it's such an obvious thing that's going to happen.
Yep.
As soon as the AI technology is even close to that, kids are going to get sucked in.
Yeah.
When Mickey can
And it's
actually be
something
one
that
of
was
your
going to
close
be
friends.
yeah, it's something that was going to be in the pipeline, for probably a couple years from now, that is probably now something that they should put, as much focus as they can into the near future, knowing that even if they're allowed to or able to open the parks next week, it is going to be likely years before they see the kind of traffic that they did
Yeah.
in January of
Well,
2020.
so if you have both, right? Like AI Mickey can teach your kid how to ask you in the best way for a Disney trip.
Yes. Well, also like AI Mickey can be built into things at the park now too, right? Like you can interact with Mickey in a way that you've never been able
Yeah.
to interact with him on a one-to-one basis at the park because they're worried about like we talked about the voice continuity and the experience. Like if there's a computer controlling how that voice at least is interacting with the child.
Somebody needs to write this screenplay. This is a great dystopian movie.
I'm just picturing the talking
beautiful tomorrow
portraits in Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Just, I don't know. It makes me nervous. I feel like anytime even if it's a trusted brand like Disney, having your child have a relationship with a augmented reality character of any kind makes me feel a little nervous.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in a way, you would argue that children already have relationships with these characters. Like the character doesn't necessarily talk back, but they have a relationship of some sort with the Elsa character or with the Iron Man character.
Right, but it's more, I think, like what the content of what they're talking about.
Yeah,
Like,
which is why I
even,
think that Disney would be the only brand in the world that
Yeah.
if there's a chance of doing it, probably can do it.
I mean, my daughter just asked Alexa the other day about how many people have coronavirus, and Alexa went and gave her the full amount of data, including how many people died, and she's been freaking out about it ever since. So, you know,
You
I
teach her about fractions next.
yes, we'll move into that direction.
Well, I mean,
Percentages.
but
she knows about
great-
whole numbers. She needs to learn about fractions.
Great example, like that was the detrimental result of her interacting with Amazon's AI. If she asked Mickey would have been like, "Ho ho, Aria, it's fine because we're all doing social distancing measures and we love one another and we won't get within 6 feet of each other until it's safe to do so again." Right? So I mean, there's a great example of how the Disney AI is probably safer than the one sitting on your
Yeah, the
countertop
Disney
already.
AI just propagandizes your kids. It's amazing. Who are you raised by? Oh, I was raised
We're
by my
running a special
mom,
for
my
Florida
dad, and
residents
Mickey.
right now. 20% off tickets for the next 2 months.
Book before June
25% if you stay at a Walt Disney World Resort. 407 W Disney.
That's a great vision of the future.
Yep.
Horrifying. All right. Anything else?
No. That's a great way to close this episode.
Yeah, I honestly don't think we've had a more interesting concept since we had the idea in the early part of the podcast about virtual reality viewing for live sporting events, which is also about to happen if you can't have people in the stadium.
I mean, it's
Somebody's
already
going to
happening.
start selling VR packages.
Yeah, I mean, the NBA's been doing it for a year.
Yeah, but how are they selling it like season ticket packages right now?
I think that's the next step.
Yeah.
Right now they're selling it, I think, game by game or, but they're building it into like their league pass subscriptions.
Yeah.
I think what you're going to see, and we talked about this on the show, we've talked about it in private as well, is like the variation, the same way you see variances in physical tickets, right? So you're going to be able to pay $5 to get to sit in the nosebleed section, like 360 Oculus view. You're going to be able to pay, $50 to sit on the floor and get that view.
Yeah, unlimited floor seats.
Yep. So,
all right.
Well, as always, thanks for joining our little corner of the world during the coronavirus epidemic. Hope you're staying safe. Hope you're listening to lots of podcasts, including all the back episodes above record that you might have missed while you're doing other things. If you get a second, rate and review in your favorite podcast app of choice. Helps more people discover the show. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next week.
Goodbye.